This story explores the psychological and legal consequences of deception, bigamy, and emotional manipulation. Bigamy, being married to more than one person, is a federal offense in all 50 states. It carries prison time, financial penalties, and permanent reputational damage. Beyond the law, betrayal at this scale causes real psychological trauma. If you recognize these patterns in your own relationship, the secrecy, the double life, the calculated charm, please seek support. What follows is a story about reclaiming power, but the most important lesson lives at the end.
The sound echoes off marble floors and glass skylights. 8 years, 2 months, 14 days. That's how long I gave Harlan Voss every single piece of myself. And in the middle of Brookfield Place, Manhattan's most gorgeous waterfront mall, all steel and cathedral light, surrounded by 300 strangers holding their breath and their camera phones, I proposed. I got down on one knee in a cobalt dress I'd saved for 6 weeks to buy. The ring box shook in my hands. The crowd was already murmuring that soft, "Oh my God, that's beautiful" sound. A little girl near the fountain pointed at me like I was magic. And Harlan Voss looked down at me and slapped me across the face. Open-handed, hard. The sound bounced off every pane of glass in that building. The crowd went silent so fast it felt like a bomb had detonated. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I looked up at him, my face stinging, ring box still in my hands. And I smiled. Not a broken smile, not a shocked, crumbling, someone hold me smile. A slow one. The kind that starts in the eyes first. And here's the part nobody watching those viral videos noticed. Here's what got buried under the gasps and the shaky footage and the think pieces about toxic proposals. I wasn't surprised, not even a little. Because 2 weeks before that mall, on a Tuesday evening, when Harlan thought I was at my cousin's place in Hoboken, I had already met his wife. Smash cut, city noise, Hudson River winds through lower Manhattan. Her name was Delaney Voss. She had his last name already, had it for 4 years. They lived in a townhouse in Carroll Gardens, Brooklyn, 12 minutes from the apartment Harlan and I shared in Tribeca. He commuted between 2 lives like some men commute between boroughs. Casual, practiced, easy. Picture this for a second. You in my shoes. 8 years of Sunday mornings and airport pickups and holding someone's hand through their mother's funeral. 8 years of "you're the only one" whispered into your hair at 2 a.m. And then a Tuesday. A wrong turn on social media, a tagged photo, a woman who looks too comfortable standing next to the man you call yours. What would you do? I found Delaney the way most disasters start, by accident. I was looking for a restaurant recommendation in Harlan's Instagram saves. Yes, I had his password because trust, right? And I found a folder he'd hidden, not deleted. Hidden, labeled D. 47 photos, Christmases, a beach I recognized as Tulum, the same trip he told me was a work conference. Delaney in a white dress, Harlan in a linen suit. A wedding photo. I remember the exact feeling, not the sob on the floor kind of devastation, something colder, something that started in my sternum and spread outward like ice cracking across a lake. I sat in our Tribeca apartment. Our apartment, whose rent I'd covered for 4 months straight while he sorted out a cash flow issue. And I didn't move for 11 minutes. I know it was 11 minutes because I watched the second hand on the kitchen clock. Then I closed Instagram, made coffee, and started thinking. Here's something nobody tells you about real betrayal. The first emotion isn't rage. It's clarity. Everything you questioned, the overnight trips to Chicago clients, the phone always face down on the counter, the way he'd sometimes look at you like he was calculating something. It all snaps into focus, sharp and clean and terrible. I, Tatum Brielle, 29 years old, senior analyst at a midtown financial firm, knew in that moment that I had 2 choices. Fall apart on this man's timeline, or rewrite the ending myself. I chose the second one, and I poured my coffee. The proposal was my idea. That part is important. I told him I wanted to do something special for our anniversary. He agreed. His exact words, and I remember them precisely because I screenshotted the text. "Whatever you want, babe, you know I'm yours." I know. I booked the spot at Brookfield Place 2 weeks in advance. I told his closest friends, Quinton and Everett, because I wanted witnesses. They both congratulated me, warmly, enthusiastically. They both knew about Delaney. I didn't know that yet. That particular knife came later. In those 2 weeks between Discovery and the mall, I was a woman running 2 parallel lives of my own. At work, sharp, focused, presenting quarterly numbers to rooms full of men in midtown suits who had no idea the woman at the podium was dismantling a man's world in her spare time. At home, soft, warm Harlan's rock, cooking his favorite short ribs on a Wednesday, laughing at his stories, sleeping beside him with my eyes open in the dark. He never noticed. That's the thing about narcissists. They don't watch you. They watch themselves in your reflection. The proposal wasn't about getting him to say yes. The proposal was the stage. I needed him public, exposed, surrounded by cameras and strangers and his own arrogance. Because Harlan Voss had spent 8 years hiding in the gaps between my trust. I was going to drag him, blinking and stumbling, into the light. I needed him to react, and I knew exactly how he'd react. He confirmed it himself 3 days before the mall when I hinted, just hinted, that I was planning something big for our anniversary. He went quiet. Then, Tate, we should probably talk about where things are going. Translation, don't corner me. Translation, I need an exit. I smiled and said, it's going to be perfect, trust me. He relaxed. He always relaxed when I said, trust me. So yes, I got down on one knee. Yes, he slapped me. Yes, 300 people saw it. Yes, it went viral by midnight. Man slaps girlfriend during her proposal. 11 million views in 18 hours. News anchors doing that practiced frowny face. Twitter is furious. His face unblurred everywhere. His real name. Harlan Voss, Tribeca, Finance. The same first and last name his wife in Carroll Gardens would type into a search bar at 6 a.m. on a Thursday, sitting at her kitchen table with her coffee going cold. That was the first move. He blew up my phone for 48 hours after. 73 texts, 19 missed calls, a voice memo that was 4 minutes long, and mostly him breathing hard and saying, Tate, let me explain, it's complicated, please just... I let it sit. On the third day I picked up, a voice like warm honey poured slow. Hey love. I'm okay, I just needed some space. Don't worry about me. Silence on his end, then with so much relief it was almost pathetic. God, Tate, I was scared you... I'm fine, I said. I'm right here. Voiceover quiet as a blade, he thought I needed space. Truth is, I needed his confidence. A panicked Harlan was unpredictable. A relieved Harlan got sloppy. That night, an anonymous email landed in the inbox of Harlan's managing director at the investment firm where he'd worked for 6 years. It contained 3 attachments: a screenshot of the wedding photo, a screenshot of his Tulum conference receipt, and a quiet 1-paragraph note about the kind of ethical character the firm might want to consider in its senior personnel. I sent it from a Proton Mail account I'd created on a library computer in the West Village. He called me that same night, voice tight but controlled. Weird day at work. Someone sent my boss some stuff. Looks like a jealous ex situation. He defended me completely though. Said it looked like a smear campaign. That's awful, I said. I'm glad your boss has your back. Yeah, we're good, baby. I stirred my tea slowly, the spoon clicking against the mug. The same way I'd been stirring every problem carefully out of my own life for 29 years. I'm right here, I said again. Ever had someone stab you in the back and smile while doing it? Yeah, me too. The difference is I learned from the master. The next 10 days were mine. I want you to understand something about calculated patience. It requires you to feel everything and show nothing. Every time I heard Harlan's voice, something volcanic moved through me. 8 years. His wedding ring, worn only on weekends, I never knew about. Delaney's face in those photos, a woman who had also been lied to, I'd come to understand. 2 women, orbiting the same man who needed both of them to feel powerful. I breathed through it, and I moved. Second move, I sent Delaney flowers. No card, just white peonies. Her favorite, according to her public Pinterest board, delivered to the Carroll Gardens townhouse on a Tuesday morning. A small luxury, enough to make her wonder. Enough to make him explain, if she mentioned it, how his wife had suddenly received an anonymous bouquet. She did mention it. He did have to explain. I know because Quinton, one of the friends who'd congratulated me on the proposal, one of the men who'd known about Delaney, showed up at my apartment on a Thursday afternoon with shame written all over his face and said, "Tate, I need to tell you something." And that's when the second knife came out. Quinton Marsh had known about Delaney for 2 years.
I'd known about Holland for 2 years.
2 years.
Holland swore us to sign.
He sat across from me at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd made Harlan's short ribs, the same table where I'd opened that hidden Instagram folder, and he told me everything. That Harlan had sworn them all to silence, that Quinton had told himself it wasn't his place, that watching me propose in that mall had broken something open in him that he couldn't close again. I listened to every word. Then I said very quietly, "Thank you for telling me." He looked wrecked. "Tate, I'm so sorry. What are you going to do?" I looked at him for a long moment. "Nothing," I said. He didn't believe me. He was right not to. But Quinton Marsh, in his guilt and his relief at having confessed, had just handed me something priceless. Corroboration, a witness, a real name attached to a real timeline. The difference between anonymous tips and documented truth. Third move. I have a friend, Sable Rohn, who works in financial compliance and has seen the inside of more fraud cases than most federal prosecutors, who owed me a favor from a situation in 2021 I won't detail here. Sable made one phone call. That phone call confirmed what I'd started to suspect from going through Harlan's discarded mail. Yes, I'd been through his mail, and no, I don't apologize for it. Harlan Voss had been running a quiet, elegant little financial fraud through his firm for approximately 18 months. Small enough to stay under the radar, consistent enough to fund a Tribeca apartment, a Carroll Gardens townhouse, and a Tulum conference. Sable filed an anonymous tip with the firm's internal compliance department. 2 days later, she filed a second one with the SEC. His boss had defended him once. His boss hadn't seen everything yet. He thought one defense saved him. I just needed him relaxed, so the fall would hurt more. Here's where the story changes shape. Because I'd been so focused, so locked in on Harlan, that I almost missed it. On a Friday night, Sable called me. Her voice had a quality I'd never heard in it before. She said, "Tate, I need you to sit down." She'd done some additional digging, the kind of digging that compliance work makes you good at. Following money the way you follow water. Finding where it pools, where it runs, and where it shouldn't be. The Tribeca apartment. My apartment. The lease was in Harlan's name. I'd always known that. He'd set it up before I moved in. But Sable had found the rent payment trail, and the rent payments didn't come from Harlan's salary. They came from a shell LLC. An LLC that was registered to a holding company. A holding company that, when you pulled the full corporate structure, connected back to a real estate investment firm in Miami. Specifically to a man named Ronan Alcott, who was Delaney's father, who had been paying for the apartment where Harlan kept me comfortable and contained, because Ronan Alcott had known about me for 3 years, and had considered me useful. I sat with the phone against my ear and the city humming 16 stories below my window, and I understood, for the first time, the full shape of what I'd been living inside. I wasn't just the deceived girlfriend. I wasn't just a victim of a cheating husband. I was a managed asset in a much larger architecture of control. Harlan hadn't just been hiding a wife from me. Someone had been hiding me from myself. The ice in my chest cracked open into something new, something darker than rage, something that required a much bigger plan. He thought I was his safe place, right up until everything exploded at once. Let me tell you something about power. Real power isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself at rooftop bars, or flex in corner offices, or slap women in front of 300 people in a waterfront mall. Real power is quiet. It moves underground, like water finding cracks in concrete, patient, inevitable, and by the time anyone feels it, the foundation is already gone. I spent 48 hours after Sable's call completely still. Not paralyzed, still. The way a surgeon goes still before the first incision, the way a chess player goes still when they finally see the whole board. Because here's what I now understood. I had been operating on one level, hurt woman, deceived girlfriend, righteous and burning, while the men around me had been operating on an entirely different level. Ronan Alcott hadn't funded my apartment out of generosity. He'd funded it because a comfortable, financially dependent Tatum Brielle was a controlled Tatum Brielle. A woman too grateful, too settled, and too managed to look too closely at who she was really living with. They had underestimated exactly one thing. What I do for a living. I am a senior financial analyst. I follow money for a profession. I build models that predict collapse. I find the hidden variable that breaks the whole equation. I had been the hidden variable the entire time. They just hadn't realized I knew it. I called Sable back on a Saturday morning, coffee in hand, Hudson River grey and cold through my window. "How deep does Ronan Alcott go?" I asked. She was quiet for 3 seconds. "Deep enough that you need to be careful." "How careful?" "Document everything, tell someone you trust, and be careful." I nodded. "Good, then let's be careful together." What Sable had found, and what 2 additional days of careful methodical digging confirmed, was that Ronan Alcott's Real Estate LLC had been used to launder money through a network of shell companies across 3 states: New York, Florida, and Illinois. Miami waterfront towers, Chicago luxury developments, Manhattan residential conversions. Harlan's financial fraud at the firm wasn't a solo operation. It was a tributary feeding into a much larger river. And Harlan, charming, reckless, face-down phone Harlan, had been sloppy enough that his piece of it was traceable. I compiled everything into a single organized file, the kind of file that has tabs and page numbers and a clear narrative structure. The kind of file that prosecutors like. Then I made one more phone call, not to an anonymous compliance tip line this time. To a name Sable gave me, a federal investigator she'd worked with on a case 2 years prior. I didn't send the file that day. Not yet. I needed one more thing first. I needed Harlan Voss to look me in the eyes. He showed up on a Thursday night, 2:17 a.m., according to my phone, when the buzzer rang. I already knew he was coming. Quinton had texted me 3 hours earlier. "Tate, it's all happening. Job, Delaney, everything. He's falling apart. I think he's going to come to you." I replied, "I know." I was already dressed. Tea is already on. I buzzed him up. He looked, and I want to be precise here because the image is important, like a man who had been running so fast for so long that his legs had finally given out mid-sprint. Harlan Voss, who wore Ferragamo loafers to casual dinners and kept his hair razor-cut every 3 weeks, stood in my doorway at 2 a.m. in a wrinkled shirt with a collar stain and eyes that had gone somewhere hollow and frightened. His managing director had called him into a meeting that afternoon. The SEC inquiry had arrived that morning. Delaney had been served papers. Not divorce papers, not yet, but a legal separation filing initiated by her attorney, which told me she'd found her own clarity somewhere in the past 2 weeks. 3 of his closest friends had stopped returning calls. His accounts, one personal, one the LLC adjacent one Sable had flagged, had been frozen pending investigation. In 24 hours, Harlan Voss had gone from untouchable to standing in my doorway at 2 a.m., looking for the one person he believed was still his. "Tate." His voice cracked with a single syllable. I stepped back and let him in. I poured the tea without asking. Earl Grey, the same kind I'd made him 100 times across 8 years of Sunday mornings and sick days and late work nights. The ritual of it, the kettle, the mug, the slow pour, the spoon, I could feel him watching it, feeling safe, feeling the muscle memory of us kick in like a reflex. I stirred slowly, the spoon clicking softly against the ceramic. The steam is rising. The same way I'd stirred every problem carefully out of my own life for 29 years. He sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd found his secret, where Quentin had confessed, and where Sable had laid out the full architecture of how I'd been managed. And he put his face in his hands. I don't know who's doing this to me, he said. The words were muffled and broken. I'm losing everything. The job, Delaney found out and these accounts, Tate. I don't know who. I set the mug in front of him. I sat down across from him. I waited until he looked up, until he actually met my eyes. And then I let the silence sit there between us like a third person at the table. He was searching my face for comfort, for the Tatum who'd held his hand through his mother's funeral, for the woman who'd said, "I'm right here," and meant it as a shelter. He found something else entirely. I don't know who's doing this to me, he said again, quieter. A question now, more than a statement. I held his gaze. I let another long beat pass. Then softly, I know exactly who's doing this to you. The silence that followed that sentence was the loudest thing I have ever heard. I watched it move across his face in stages. Confusion first, a slight furrow, his brain trying to categorize what I'd just said. Then something shifting underneath that. Then the first real crack of understanding began at the edges of his expression, like light getting in under a door. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. I didn't fill the space. I had learned across 8 years of conversations with a man who controlled every room he entered by talking, that silence is the most devastating weapon available to someone who has nothing left to prove. I just looked at him. The kitchen clock ticked. The city hummed 16 floors below us, a taxi horn somewhere on Hudson Street. The distant percussion of the city that never actually sleeps, just breathes differently at 3 a.m. His hands, wrapped around the mug I'd just given him, began to shake slightly. Tate. I found the folder in April, I said. My voice was conversational, calm as a financial presentation. 47 photos, the Tulum wedding, Delaney, Carroll Gardens. I paused. I counted the photos. The blood left his face. The flowers were from me, I continued. The anonymous emails were from me. The compliance tip was from me. I tilted my head slightly. The SEC inquiry. I let that one land, watched his jaw go slack. That was from me too. He made a sound, not quite a word. But here's the part, I said, that I think you should know. Because I think you deserve to understand the full picture. I folded my hands on the table. I found your father-in-law Harlan. I found the LLC. I found what the LLC was connected to. I found all of it. I picked up my own mug, took a slow sip. I filed a more complete version of that information with a federal investigator 6 days ago. It's been sitting in their hands ever since, waiting. The shaking in his hands had spread to his shoulders. Waiting for what? He whispered. For tonight, I said. I needed to look at you first. I want you to understand something, because this is the part that matters most. The part that lives after the righteous fury. The part nobody puts in the viral video. I looked at Harlan Voss across my kitchen table at 3 a.m., and I felt victory, yes. The cold, clean satisfaction of a plan executed precisely. But underneath that, something more complicated. Something that felt like grief wearing a different coat. 8 years is not nothing. It is not nothing. Even when the 8 years were built on a lie, the feelings inside them were real. My feelings were real. The Sunday mornings were real. The grief at his mother's funeral was real. What I was burning down was real, and some of the smoke was going to get in my own lungs. I knew that. I had known it for weeks. I had chosen it anyway. I stood up. He reached across the table, a grasping, desperate motion. Tate, please, we can... No, I said, not cruel, not heated, just final. I walked to the door and opened it. He didn't move for a moment, just sat there with his hands on the table and his face doing something I don't have a clean word for. Reckoning, maybe. The particular devastation of a man who built his entire life on other people's willingness to trust him, finally sitting inside what that costs. I waited. He stood. He walked toward the door. He stopped when he was close enough that I could see the redness around his eyes and the grey beginning at his temples that I had watched appear over the past 2 years and never questioned. I loved you, he said, and this is the part I'll carry longest. I think he meant it. In whatever hollowed-out, self-serving, deeply broken way, he was capable of meaning it. I looked at him for a long moment. "I know," I said. "That's what made it work." I opened the door wider. He walked out. I closed it behind him. I stood in my kitchen for a long time. The tea is cooling, the city outside. Just breathing. 3 weeks later, Harlan Voss was placed on administrative leave, pending a federal investigation into securities fraud and related financial crimes. Ronan Alcott's LLC was flagged as part of a wider money laundering inquiry spanning 3 states. Delaney Voss filed for divorce. She and I have never spoken directly. I hope she's okay. I mean that. Quinton Marsh lost 2 professional relationships over his silence and gained, I'm told, a conscience he uses more carefully now. I vacated the Tribeca apartment, found a place in Astoria, smaller, entirely mine, lease in my own name. Harlan lost his marriage. He lost his job. He lost his reputation. He is currently cooperating with federal investigators to reduce his exposure to the Alcott connection. I never raised my voice once. My heels on the Brookfield Place marble, walking away. The slap already happened. The crowd already gasped. The cameras already caught it all. I'm already 3 moves ahead. Voiceover, barely above a whisper. I didn't slap him because I was angry. I slapped him because humiliation is louder than truth. And I needed everyone in that room to remember his face. 8 years, 1 slap, 1 proposal. He gave me the perfect stage. You didn't just betray me. You gave me the perfect ending. Here is what this story actually teaches. Underneath all the fury and the calculated moves, and the tea stirred slowly at 3 a.m. Bigamy is a crime. In every American state, it carries real prison sentences, civil liability, and financial consequences. If you suspect you're in a relationship with someone who is legally married to another person, document everything and consult an attorney. You have legal recourse. Financial abuse and control are forms of domestic abuse. Being kept financially dependent on someone through managed housing, controlled income, and manufactured gratitude is a recognized pattern of coercive control. If someone else is paying for your life without your full knowledge and consent, that is not generosity. That is a leash. Revenge feels like power. Justice is power. There is a difference. One burns in your chest and fades. The other stands up in a courtroom. Tatum's moves worked because she documented, collaborated with a compliance professional, and ultimately handed her evidence to federal investigators. Not because she acted on pure emotion. The legal path was always the sharpest blade. You are allowed to be angry, fully, completely, without apology. Rage at real betrayal is not a character flaw, but the people who come out the other side, whole, standing, powerful, are the ones who channel it into something that builds them back up, instead of burning down what's left of themselves. And finally, the scars are real. 8 years don't disappear because the person who filled them turned out to be a lie. Grief and justice can live in the same body at the same time. That is not weakness. That is the full cost of loving someone in a city that moves this fast. In a world that sometimes rewards the wrong people for far too long. Until it doesn't. The blade was always yours. Some of us just take longer to pick it up. Tatum Brielle, Astoria, New York.